My husband left me 37 miles from home in the pouring rain. He said I needed a lesson. I didn't argue. I just watched his car drive away. A black pickup truck pulled up moments later. My bodyguard got out, calm and ready. I smiled as I climbed into the passenger seat. His cruelty was over. This was his last mistake. I hit record on my phone and slipped it back into my pocket as Andrew's Mercedes pulled into the deserted rest stop. The rain hadn't started yet, but I could smell it coming. "Get out," he said, not even bothering to turn off the engine. "You need a lesson, Amanda. Maybe walking home will teach you some respect." 37 miles. He'd calculated it perfectly. Too far for a cab, too remote for public transportation. What he didn't know was that I'd been recording everything for 8 months, and that Marcus, my brother, was already parked behind the abandoned gas station, waiting for my signal. The leather seat creaked as I turned to face him. Andrew's jaw was set in that familiar line of satisfaction, the one he wore when he closed a particularly cruel deal at his investment firm. 3 hours earlier, we'd been celebrating our anniversary at the Bluebird Steakhouse, a fancy place we only went to for special occasions. Now, he was abandoning me on a lonely highway because I'd asked him why $10,000 had disappeared from our joint account. "Are you really going to do this?" I kept my voice steady, letting my phone capture every word. "Actions have consequences, Amanda. You went behind my back, you called my accountant, you humiliated me with your paranoid questions. Maybe a long walk in the rain will remind you who handles the money in this family." I thought of the pearl earring in my jewelry box at home, Nadia's earring, found under our bed 2 days ago. The $10,000 probably bought her something nice, but I didn't mention it yet. No, everything had to happen in the right order, just as Marcus and I had rehearsed. "It's going to pour," I said, gesturing to the darkening sky. "Then you'd better start walking." His fingers drummed on the steering wheel. "Unless you want to apologize right now and admit you were wrong." 6 months ago, I would have apologized. 6 months ago, I still believed our marriage could be saved. That was before I found the second set of his company's accounting books, before the mysterious withdrawals, before I discovered he'd been transferring our assets into accounts only he controlled. The moment I started asking questions, he turned cruel. Tonight was his escalation, but it was also his downfall. "I'll walk," I said, opening the door. "Good choice. Maybe by the time you get home, you'll remember your place." I stepped out onto the cracked asphalt. The rest stop had been abandoned for years. Just a dark building with boarded-up windows and a parking lot overgrown with weeds. Andrew had chosen it specifically for its isolation. He'd mentioned it last week in passing as we drove by. "Imagine getting stranded out here," he'd said, "miles from anywhere." That's when I knew what he was planning. The Mercedes engine roared. Through the passenger window, I saw him check his phone. He was probably texting Nadia that the job was done. Then he sped off. His tires squealed slightly on the worn pavement, leaving me alone in the gathering gloom. I counted to 60, watching his taillights disappear around the bend. Then I walked calmly toward the abandoned gas station where Marcus's black Ford was hidden. My brother stepped out, holding an umbrella and a thermos of coffee. "Did you get everything?" he asked. "Every word," I said, pulling out my phone and stopping the recording. He actually said I needed to remember my place. Marcus shook his head. 3 years of watching him control you was bad enough. But this, he gestured to the empty rest stop. "This is criminal abandonment. Rebecca is going to love this recording." I accepted the coffee gratefully, feeling the warmth spread through my hands. The rain was beginning now, thick drops splattering against the cracked concrete. By morning, Andrew would think I'd spent the night walking through the storm, broken and humiliated. He would expect to find me at the front door, ready to beg for forgiveness. "Is Valentina ready?" I asked. "She's been monitoring the accounts all night. The moment he transferred that 10 grand this afternoon, she documented it all. Her forensic audit goes back 2 years. He's been siphoning money into offshore accounts, probably planning to divorce you once he'd hidden enough. And Rebecca's filing the emergency papers at 9 in the morning, I added. Abandonment, financial abuse, fraud. She says with tonight's recording plus everything we've gathered, Andrew won't know what hit him." We climbed into Marcus's truck just as the sky opened up, the rain drumming on the windshield. I thought of Andrew driving home, pleased with his cruel lesson, maybe pouring himself a whiskey to celebrate putting his wife in her place. He had no idea that 8 months ago, when he started hiding money, I hired my own team. Marcus installed cameras throughout the house under the pretense of a security upgrade. Valentina, a forensic accountant specializing in financial abuse cases, had traced every single dollar. Rebecca, one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in the city, had built a file that now filled 3 boxes. "The house recordings uploaded properly," Marcus said, checking his phone. "We've got him on camera last Tuesday, bringing Nadia to the house while you were with Mom. They used your bed." I felt something cold settle in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak. That had passed months ago. It was a hard, crystalline resolve. "He's been planning this for a while," I said. "The escalation, the financial control, the isolation from my friends, classic patterns of abuse. Rebecca says judges don't look kindly on husbands who abandon their wives as punishment." Marcus drove carefully through the storm, taking back roads to avoid any chance of Andrew seeing us. We'd planned this route weeks ago, even doing dry runs. Every detail mattered. The hotel room was reserved under my maiden name, paid for in cash. Marcus had gradually withdrawn over 2 months. The clothes I'd need were already there, along with copies of all the documentation. "He's going to look for you when you don't show up tonight, you know," Marcus said. "Let him. The hotel security cameras will show I arrived alone, soaked, traumatized. The front desk clerk will testify I could barely speak for the tears. Rebecca coached me on exactly what to say and how to act." The rain intensified as we headed into the city. Andrew would be home by now, probably on his second drink, maybe calling Nadia to gloat about teaching me a lesson. The next morning, he'd wake up expecting to find me shattered. Instead, he'd find his assets frozen, his office locked, and federal investigators waiting to discuss the discrepancies Valentina had uncovered in his firm's books. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked as the hotel came into view. I thought of the woman I was 3 years ago, independent, successful, before Andrew systematically dismantled my life. I thought of the recording on my phone, his cold voice telling me to get out and walk 37 miles in the storm. I thought of Nadia's earring, the empty bank accounts, and the prenup he'd hidden in his office that would have left me with nothing. "I've been ready for 8 months, I said. He just gave me the last piece of evidence I needed. Marcus parked at the side entrance to the hotel. I took the small overnight bag we'd prepared, just enough to look like I'd escaped with nothing, and stepped out into the rain. It was time to play the role of the traumatized wife, abandoned and afraid. Tomorrow, Andrew would learn who really needed a lesson. The hotel lobby was blindingly bright after the darkness outside. Water dripped from my hair onto the marble floor as I approached the counter, my hands shaking just enough to be convincing. The clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, immediately reached for a pile of towels. "Oh my goodness, are you all right?" she asked, coming around the counter and wrapping one around me. "My husband," I managed to say, letting my voice crack. "He left me at a rest stop in the storm. I had to walk for miles before someone helped me." Her face went from concern to horror. Perfect. Every word would be documented in the hotel's incident report, just as Rebecca had instructed. The clerk led me to a chair and brought me a hot tea while she processed my check-in. I gave her my maiden name, Amanda Davis. I paid with the emergency credit card I'd opened 6 months ago, the one Andrew knew nothing about. Room 412 was small, but clean, with a view of the city lights blurred by the rain. I locked the door, put the chain on, and finally let myself breathe. Then I pulled out my second phone, the one Marcus had given me, and played the recording from the car. Andrew's voice filled the cold room, even and measured. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Calling my accountant behind my back, asking me questions about our finances as if you understand the answers." My own voice, carefully controlled. "It's our money, Andrew. I have a right to know where it's going." "Our money." His laugh was a sharp bark. "I earn it. I manage it. You spend it on expensive shoes and those ridiculous charity dinners. $700 on organic vegetables last week, Amanda. $700. I remembered that trip to the grocery store. I'd bought ingredients for the dinner he insisted on hosting for his clients, the same dinner where he spent $8,000 on wine without batting an eye. The recording continued. You embarrassed me at the Morales party, contradicting me about the European markets in front of my colleagues. Where did you even get those opinions? From some daytime TV show? I have an MBA from the University of Pennsylvania, Andrew. I worked in financial services for 5 years before I met you. Before I rescued you from that mediocre career, you mean? You were analyzing penny stocks at some third-rate firm. I gave you a life you never would have made for yourself. I closed my eyes, remembering the woman I was at Davis Investments. I hadn't analyzed penny stocks. I'd managed a $30 million portfolio. But Andrew had rewritten the history so many times that sometimes even I forgot the truth. My phone vibrated. A text from Marcus. Valentina found something. 3 more accounts in the Cayman Islands. He's been moving money for 18 months. 18 months? I remembered when things had started to change. The sudden interest in separate checking accounts for tax purposes, the financial advisor who showed up without explanation, the documents he asked me to sign without reading, saying, "It's just routine, trust me." Another text, this time from Rebecca. Judge Coleman accepted an emergency hearing for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring the recording. Judge Patricia Coleman had a reputation for seeing through men like Andrew. She'd presided over 3 high-profile financial abuse cases in the last year, all with favorable outcomes for the wives. Rebecca had waited specifically for her docket. I changed into the dry clothes from the emergency bag I'd stashed here yesterday. Then, I sat at the small desk and began to write. Not the statement Rebecca would help me polish for court, but notes to myself, reminders of who I really was underneath the persona Andrew had tried to create. I wrote about the promotion I'd turned down because Andrew said the travel would strain our marriage, the investment opportunity I'd identified that would have tripled my personal savings if I still had personal savings. The friendship with my college roommate that ended when Andrew convinced me she was jealous of our happiness. My phone rang. Andrew's ringtone. I let it go to voicemail. Then I played the message on speaker, recording it with my second phone. Amanda, this is ridiculous. It's been 3 hours. The lesson is learned, okay? Call me and I'll come get you. Don't make this worse than it needs to be. 10 minutes later, another call. This time his voice was harder. I know you have your phone. Stop being childish and call me back. If you're trying to worry me, it's not working. I'm going to sleep. Find your own way home. But I could hear the nervousness in his voice. He was starting to realize something wasn't right. I'd always called by now, always apologized, always came crawling back. The silence was breaking his script. At midnight, a number I didn't recognize called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me, staying silent on the line. Hello, Amanda. Her voice was uncertain. Andrew asked me to call you. He's worried. He said you had a fight and you're not answering his calls. He wants you to know he's sorry and that you should come home. Andrew never apologized. He never admitted fault. That he'd sent his mistress to deliver a fake apology showed how unhinged he was becoming. I hung up without speaking. By 1 a.m., the calls were coming every 15 minutes. Andrew, his mother Margaret, even his business partner James. I documented every single one, their numbers, the times, their increasingly frantic messages. The abandoned wife was supposed to be desperate to be rescued, not maintaining absolute silence. I ordered room service, charging it to the emergency card, soup, a salad, and a glass of wine. Letting the receipt show I was composed enough to eat, documenting that I wasn't crumbling as Andrew had hoped. At 2:30, a text came in that made me smile. Not from Andrew, but from our neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Saw Andrew in the driveway with a flashlight looking under your car. He just left quickly. All good? He was looking for my car, not knowing Marcus had moved it to a long-term parking lot across town 2 days ago. Another piece of evidence that I'd been planning to leave, that his abandonment had only accelerated my timeline. I opened the curtains and watched the storm rage over the city. Somewhere out there, Andrew was beginning to realize his perfectly controlled world was unraveling. He thought he taught me a lesson about power and place. Tomorrow, when the markets opened and he discovered his offshore accounts were frozen, when his keycard failed at the office, when federal investigators showed up with questions about the discrepancies Valentina had uncovered, he would understand who was really teaching whom. The morning sun broke through the hotel curtains at 7 o'clock, but I'd been awake since 5, sitting at the small desk with my laptop open to our joint checking account. The balance showed exactly what I expected. Andrew had already moved another $20,000 at 6:47 a.m. He was in a panic, trying to hide assets before I could get to them. Too late. Valentina had already documented it all. By noon, my hotel suite had been transformed into a command center. Valentina arrived first, carrying 2 suitcases full of printed documents. Her usually perfect makeup was slightly smudged from working all night. She spread everything over the dining table methodically: bank statements, transfer logs, falsified tax documents. Each pile was labeled with colored tabs. "The Cayman accounts have been frozen since 9 this morning," she said, pulling up a spreadsheet on her laptop. "Andrew tried to access them at dawn. 3 failed attempts. He's probably tearing his office apart right now." Rebecca came in next, a phone pressed to her ear, talking in a rapid-fire legal language I only half understood. She ended the call and turned to me with a grim, satisfied expression. "Judge Coleman moved up our hearing to 1 p.m. She wants to address this immediately. Also, Andrew just hired Richard Black, the shark, the same guy who got the pharma executive off last year." "Black?" Marcus asked, entering with a box of surveillance equipment. "He's not cheap. Andrew must have liquidated something major to pay for him." I felt a flicker of worry, but Rebecca put a firm hand on my shoulder. "Black is good, but he can't argue with video evidence and financial records. Besides, he's going in blind. We've had 8 months to prepare." Marcus hooked his laptop up to the suite's television and pulled up the surveillance footage from our house. "I compiled the highlights, if you can call them that. Fair warning, Amanda, this isn't easy to watch." The first clip showed Andrew in his study at 2 in the morning 3 weeks ago. I'd been asleep upstairs, knocked out by the sleeping pills he'd started suggesting I take for my anxiety. On screen, Andrew carefully photographed documents from our safe, then placed them back exactly as they were. The documents were our joint investment portfolios, my mother's power of attorney papers, and the deed to the lake house my grandmother left me. "He was creating a duplicate file," Valentina explained. "Making fakes with subtle changes. If you hadn't caught on, he could have slowly replaced the originals." The next clip was worse. Andrew and Nadia in our living room 2 months ago when he told me he was at a client dinner. She was wearing my robe, the silk one from our honeymoon in Cancun. They were laughing at something on his phone. "Turn it up," I said, even as my stomach churned. Andrew's voice filled the room. "She actually believed me when I said the conference was mandatory. I've trained her well. A few more months, and I'll have everything transferred. Then we can end this charade." Nadia's laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. "The prenup really says she gets nothing?" "The prenup is irrelevant. She'll never fight it. Amanda doesn't have the spine." Marcus paused the video. The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. I got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city below. Somewhere down there, Andrew was probably in his office, trying to figure out why his computer access was revoked, why his assistant couldn't reach the bank, why everything was falling apart. "There's more," Marcus said softly. "Do you want to see it?" I nodded. The next clip showed Andrew in the garage on the phone, pacing between our cars. The timestamp was last Tuesday, when I was at my book club. "Jennifer has been perfect," he was saying. "She has no idea. I'm recording our conversations. Every detail about Amanda's mom's inheritance, the Alzheimer's diagnosis they're hiding, her dad's trust fund, it's worth almost $2 million, and Amanda doesn't even know it exists. My legs felt weak. Jennifer, my younger sister, whom I'd protected from her gambling addiction for years, whom I'd covered for with our parents countless times, she'd been giving Andrew information about our family, about money I didn't even know existed. When did he contact her? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Valentina pulled up phone records. First contact 13 months ago. Regular calls started 10 months ago, always when you weren't home. He's been paying off her debts in exchange for information. Rebecca looked at her watch. We need to get to the courthouse in 30 minutes. Amanda, are you ready for this? To see him today? I turned from the window. Show me the rest first. I need to know everything. Marcus opened another folder. This is from his office computer. A contact in IT pulled it before they cut off Andrew's access this morning. The screen filled with emails between Andrew and his lawyer, dated 6 months ago. The subject line read, Project Fresh Start. Inside were detailed plans for divorcing me, including psychological tactics to make me doubt myself, financial moves to leave me destitute, and even suggestions to gradually increase the emotional abuse to make me more compliant during the process. One line stood out. The key is to make her believe she's crazy. Constant gaslighting, hide things, deny conversations, contradict her memories. By the time we file, she'll be too unstable to fight back effectively. I thought of all the times in the last year Andrew had told me I was remembering things wrong. The dinner reservation I'd made that he swore I never told him about. The conversation about visiting my parents that he claimed never happened. The jewelry that would disappear and reappear in strange places. I had secretly started writing things down, thinking I was losing my mind. He was following a playbook, Rebecca said. This lawyer, Douglas Fisher, specializes in high net worth divorces where one spouse wants to leave the other with nothing. He's currently under investigation for ethical violations. Valentina pulled up one last document. This triggered our emergency filing this morning. Andrew transferred $3.2 million from his firm's client accounts to a personal account in Panama yesterday afternoon. Right before he abandoned you, he must have thought he'd have more time before anyone noticed. He was running, I said, understanding dawning on me. The abandonment wasn't just about control. He knew something was coming. The SEC received an anonymous tip yesterday morning, Rebecca said with a slight smile, about irregularities in his firm's reporting. I looked at her. You, Valentina. Actually, once she documented the embezzlement, we had an obligation to report it. The weight of Andrew's crimes was staggering. This wasn't just about our marriage or his affair. He was a criminal who had used our relationship as cover while he pillaged client accounts and prepared his escape. The man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years was capable of destroying not just me, but dozens of innocent investors who trusted him with their life savings. Judge Coleman needs to see all of this, I said, gathering my strength. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence. Rebecca smiled, the kind of smile that reminded me why she'd never lost a financial abuse case. She'll see everything, and then Andrew Carter will learn what it feels like to lose it all. The courthouse halls were marble and mahogany, designed to intimidate. I walked down them in my sharpest suit, a charcoal gray one Andrew had never seen because I'd bought it last month, specifically for this moment. Rebecca walked at my side, briefcase in hand, while Marcus flanked my other side. We entered courtroom 4B at 12:55 on the dot. Andrew was already there, seated next to Richard Black, whose slick haircut couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes. Andrew looked smaller, his usual imposing presence diminished by his rumpled clothes and the dark circles under his eyes. He'd clearly slept in his office. When he saw me, his expression shifted from exhaustion to pure rage. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Patricia Coleman entered, her black robes adding gravity to an already tense atmosphere. She took her seat and began to review the documents in front of her, reading glasses perched on her nose. We are here for an emergency petition filed by Amanda Carter regarding marital assets and spousal abandonment. Her voice was laced with the authority of someone who had seen every kind of matrimonial disaster. Mr. Black, I see you were retained this morning. Yes, Your Honor. We request a continuance to review the motion properly. Denied. Your client allegedly abandoned his wife in dangerous conditions last night. Time is of the essence. She turned to Rebecca. Counselor, present your evidence. Rebecca stood, her voice soft as silk. Your Honor, at approximately 8:47 p.m. last night, Andrew Carter deliberately abandoned his wife at a rest stop 37 miles from their home during a severe rainstorm. We have an audio recording of the incident. She played the recording over the courtroom's speakers. Andrew's voice filled the space, cold and clear. You need a lesson, Amanda. Walking home might teach you some respect. I watched as Andrew's face went pale. Black leaned in, whispering furiously. Andrew shook his head, gesturing wildly with his hands. Furthermore, Rebecca continued, Mr. Carter has been systematically concealing marital assets for 18 months. We have documentation of offshore accounts totaling $8 million and evidence of embezzlement from his investment firm of $3.2 million. Objection! Black jumped to his feet. These are baseless accusations. Then let's base them, Rebecca said calmly, presenting a stack of bank documents. Exhibit A, Your Honor, transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, all initiated by Mr. Carter without his wife's knowledge or consent. Judge Coleman reviewed the documents, her expression darkening with each page. Mr. Carter, did you abandon your wife last night? Andrew stood, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, there was a misunderstanding. It's a yes or no question, Mr. Carter. I did leave her at a rest stop, but during a storm, 37 miles from home, she had her phone. She could have called someone. The judge's eyebrows raised. How considerate of you. She turned back to Rebecca. Continue. Rebecca projected financial records onto the courtroom screen. Mr. Carter has also been conducting an extramarital affair with his assistant, Nadia Jones, using marital funds to buy gifts and finance trips. This includes a pearl necklace valued at $12,000, reported as stolen to insurance, but actually given to Ms. Jones. My phone vibrated. A text from Marcus. He's here. The courtroom doors opened, and Special Agent Thomas Chen from the SEC entered, followed by 2 federal agents. Andrew's head snapped around, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Your Honor, Special Agent Chen said, addressing the judge. Apologies for the interruption. We have a warrant for the arrest of Andrew Carter on charges of wire fraud and embezzlement. Black leaped to his feet. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. So is stealing $3.2 million from clients' accounts. Judge Coleman replied dryly. She gestured to the federal agents. Gentlemen, please wait until we conclude this hearing. Mr. Carter isn't going anywhere. Andrew sank into his chair. His phone on the defense table lit up with call after call. I could see the names flashing. His mother, Margaret, his business partner, James, and repeatedly, Nadia. Given the evidence presented, Judge Coleman continued, I am granting the emergency order. All marital assets are frozen pending investigation. Ms. Carter is granted exclusive use of the marital home and temporary support of $10,000 a month. Mr. Carter, you are ordered to maintain a 500-foot distance from your wife. $10,000 a month? Andrew exploded, rising despite Black's attempts to stop him. That's insane! She doesn't need... Mr. Carter abandoned his wife in a storm after hiding millions in assets. I am being generous by not charging you with contempt right now. Sit down. As Andrew collapsed back into his chair, my phone rang. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call, but she called back immediately. And again. Rebecca leaned over. You should document that. I nodded, taking screenshots of the call log. 17 calls from Jennifer in the last hour, 43 from Andrew since last night, 22 from his mother Margaret. Even a few from numbers I didn't recognize, probably Andrew's colleagues or clients who'd heard about the federal investigation. Special Agent Chen came to our table as the judge finalized her orders. "Miss Carter, we'll need your cooperation with our investigation. Your lawyer mentioned you have additional evidence." I nodded. 8 months of documentation, financial records, recordings, emails, everything. "Your husband is looking at 15 to 20 years, if convicted on all charges." Andrew must have heard, because he suddenly rose again, pointing at me. "You did this! You set me up! This whole thing was a trap!" Judge Coleman's gavel slammed down hard. "Mr. Carter, control yourself or I will add contempt charges." "She planned it," Andrew continued, his composure completely shattered. "The recording, the documentation, she knew I was going to leave her there." "So you admit you abandoned her?" the judge asked. Black physically pulled Andrew back down, but the damage was done. Andrew had just confessed in open court, in front of federal agents, that he had deliberately abandoned me. As we prepared to leave, Nadia burst through the courtroom doors. Her designer dress was wrinkled, her perfectly coiffed hair disheveled. She looked around in desperation until her eyes found Andrew. "You said you were divorced!" she screamed across the courtroom. "You said the papers were already filed. You said she was crazy and making things up." The judge sighed. "Ma'am, please remove yourself from my courtroom." But Nadia wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone, waving it in the air. "I have texts, recordings. You promised we'd get married. You said the money was yours." Special Agent Chen's eyes lit up. He approached Nadia carefully. "Ma'am, we'd very much like to speak with you." Andrew's destruction was complete. His mistress was handing evidence to the state. His assets were frozen. Federal agents were waiting to arrest him, and his carefully constructed image had collapsed in less than an hour. As we walked out, leaving Andrew to be processed by the federal agents, my phone vibrated with one last message. It was from Margaret, Andrew's mother. "I hope you're satisfied. You destroyed a good man out of petty jealousy." I deleted it without replying. Margaret would soon learn that her son wasn't a good man. He was a criminal who had been exposed. And it wasn't me who destroyed him. He destroyed himself. The courthouse steps were mobbed with reporters when we exited. Someone had leaked the story, probably a court clerk who recognized Andrew's name from the financial pages. Microphones were thrust in my face as Rebecca guided me through the crowd, her hand firm on my elbow. "Ms. Carter, is it true your husband stole millions?" "Amanda, how long have you been planning this?" "Will you be pressing additional charges?" Rebecca stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. "My client will not be making any statements at this time. The federal investigation is ongoing." We pushed our way to Marcus's truck, and I saw a news van from the local channel setting up across the street. By tonight, Andrew's face would be on every local channel. The golden boy of New York's investment funds, arrested for embezzlement and fraud. Margaret must have been shattered. Back at the hotel, I collapsed onto the sofa while Rebecca poured us both some water. My phone hadn't stopped vibrating since we left the courthouse. I scrolled through the messages, each one with a different flavor of surprise or judgment. A text from my hairstylist. "Just saw the news. Good for you, girl." From Richard, one of Andrew's golf buddies. "This is a misunderstanding, right? Andrew would never do what they're saying." From 3 different neighbors, variations of, "We always knew there was something off about him." The most interesting message came from James Fisher, Andrew's business partner. "Amanda, we need to talk. There are things about the firm you need to know, things that aren't in the federal filing." Rebecca read it over my shoulder. "Set up a meeting, record everything." At 4 p.m., the local news ran the lead story. The headlines scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Prominent investment fund manager arrested for embezzlement following spousal abandonment incident." They'd already gotten Andrew's mugshot. He looked haggard, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his designer suit replaced by standard prison-issue clothes. The reporter was standing in front of our house, my house now, describing the scandal in breathless detail. Sources close to the investigation report that Andrew Carter allegedly abandoned his wife during last night's severe rainstorm, leaving her stranded 37 miles from home. This morning, federal agents arrested Carter on charges of embezzling $3.2 million from client accounts. Amanda Carter could not be reached for comment. My phone rang. Jennifer again. This time I answered. Amanda, please, I need to explain. You told him about Mom's will, about the trust fund Dad set up, about her diagnosis. Silence. Then, in a low voice, she said, he said he was trying to help. He said you were too stressed to handle the information, that he wanted to protect you. He paid off your gambling debts. I didn't know what he was planning. He seemed so concerned, so caring. I thought of all the times Jennifer had called in the last year, asking seemingly innocent questions. How's Mom? Have you talked to her lawyer lately? Remember that property Dad bought in the Hamptons? Each conversation had been to collect information for Andrew. He manipulated you, I said, just like he manipulated me. Amanda, I'm so sorry. When I saw the news, when I realized what he'd done, I've been sick all day. Can we please meet? Rebecca shook her head, but something in Jennifer's voice made me pause. She sounded genuinely broken, not just worried about the consequences. Tomorrow, neutral location, come alone. After I hung up, Marcus pulled up social media on his laptop. You need to see this. Andrew's company Facebook page was imploding. Clients were demanding their money back. Former employees were sharing stories of suspicious activity they'd witnessed. One woman wrote, "He fired me when I questioned missing funds last year. Now I know why." But the most devastating blow came from Nadia. She had gone live on Instagram, posting screenshots of their text conversations, pictures of their trips financed with stolen money, and a long description detailing how Andrew had manipulated her into believing I was the villain. He told me his wife was emotionally disturbed, she wrote, that she was refusing to grant him a divorce, that she was threatening to ruin him if he left. I believed every word because he was so convincing, so sophisticated. I was an idiot, but he was a master manipulator. The photos were damning. Andrew and Nadia in first-class seats to Paris, raising champagne flutes. Andrew and Nadia at the same resort in Cabo, where we celebrated our 5th anniversary. Andrew and Nadia in our bed. She'd even posted that picture, though Instagram quickly took it down. At 6, Andrew's mother, Margaret, issued a statement through her attorney. Rebecca read it aloud, barely suppressing a laugh. The Carter family is shocked by these allegations. We believe this is a coordinated attack orchestrated by a vindictive wife seeking financial gain. Andrew Carter is a respectable member of the community who has been victimized by a calculating woman who married him for his money. Seriously, that's their angle? Marcus asked, after everyone had heard what Andrew said in court. My phone rang again, this time an unknown number. Against Rebecca's advice, I answered. Miss Carter, this is Patricia Jackson from the New York Times. We're preparing a story on systematic fraud in boutique investment funds. Your husband's case is part of a larger pattern we've been investigating. Would you be willing to share your experience? Rebecca took the phone. I am Amanda Carter's attorney. All press inquiries must be directed to my office. She hung up and turned to me. By tomorrow, this will be national news. Andrew didn't just destroy himself. He's taking down an entire network of corrupt fund managers. The SEC is widening their investigation. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere in federal custody, Andrew was probably meeting with Black, trying to figure out how to spin this. But there was no spinning video evidence, recorded confessions, and millions in stolen money. My phone lit up with one more message, this time from David Brennan, Andrew's biggest client. Miss Carter, I want you to know that several of us, the victims, are filing civil lawsuits against your husband. However, we want to make it clear that you are not our target. We know you're a victim too. In fact, we'd like you to testify about what you observed. The irony was perfect. Andrew spent years telling me I was too stupid to understand finance, too naive to grasp business. Now his former clients wanted my testimony to help bury him. As the sun set over New York, painting the sky the color of justice, I realized that Andrew's public downfall was only just beginning. Tomorrow there would be more headlines, more revelations, more people stepping forward with stories about the man they trusted with their money. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I sat in peaceful silence, no longer afraid of his footsteps, his moods, his cruel words designed to keep me small. The man who abandoned me in the rain had created his own storm, and now he was drowning in it. The next morning, a knock on the hotel room door caught me by surprise. Through the peephole, I saw Jennifer standing in the hallway, her usually impeccable appearance completely undone. Her hands shook as she held a manila envelope against her chest, and her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "I thought we agreed to meet at a neutral location," I said. "I couldn't wait. Amanda, please. There are things you need to know right now. Before I talk to the SEC this afternoon." Marcus appeared in the doorway of the adjoining room, alert and protective. I nodded to him, letting him know it was okay. Then I let Jennifer in. She sat on the edge of the sofa, placing the envelope on the coffee table with trembling fingers. "Andrew first contacted me 13 months ago," she began, her voice a whisper. "He knew about the gambling. I don't know how he found out, but he knew I owed $47,000 to some very unforgiving people. He offered to pay it all, no questions asked, if I just answered a few questions about our family's finances." "And you accepted?" My voice was flat, controlled. I was desperate. They were threatening to go to my employer and ruin my career. Andrew seemed genuinely to want to help. He said you were too proud to ask our parents for money, that he wanted to surprise you by fixing family problems behind the scenes. She opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of printed emails. "These are our conversations, all of them. I printed them last night when I realized what he was really doing." I took the first email, dated over a year ago. Andrew's tone was warm, concerned, almost brotherly. He wrote about wanting to be a better husband, to understand my family's dynamic so he could support me better. The manipulation was masterful. "He was particularly interested in Mom," Jennifer continued. "He wanted to know about her health, her mental state, her finances. I thought he was planning something nice for her, maybe paying for better care. You told him about the Alzheimer's." Jennifer nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He made me promise not to tell you. He didn't want you to worry," he said you had enough stress with Andrew being so demanding." I kept reading. The emails showed how Andrew's questions became more specific over time. What properties did our parents own? Were there any trusts? Who was the executor of their wills? Jennifer answered everything, believing she was helping her brother-in-law take better care of our family. "Last month, he asked me to take Mom to sign some papers," Jennifer said. "He said they were for insurance purposes, that they would protect her assets if her condition got worse. I drove her there, Amanda. Thank God her lawyer was there that day and recognized them as property transfer documents. That's when I started to realize something was wrong." My phone vibrated. David Brennan was calling. I put it on speaker so Marcus could listen. "Ms. Carter, I hate to bother you, but this is urgent. I've been going through our client files all night. Andrew wasn't just stealing from the general fund. He was specifically targeting our elderly clients, particularly widows." "What do you mean, targeting?" I asked. "Ms. Elena Rodriguez, for example. Her husband died 2 years ago, left her everything with specific instructions for Andrew to personally manage her portfolio. In 6 months, Andrew convinced her to sign power of attorney documents. She thought she was giving him authority to make trades. He used it to empty her accounts." I felt sick. Elena Rodriguez was 78 years old. I'd met her at several company events, a sweet woman who always talked about her grandchildren. "How much did he take?" $800,000. But the worst part is he convinced her she was developing memory problems, that she was forgetting conversations about withdrawals she had authorized. He gaslighted her into believing she had dementia. Marcus was already taking notes, documenting everything for Rebecca. This changed the entire scale of the case. Andrew wasn't just a white-collar criminal. He was a predator who specifically hunted vulnerable people. "I have recordings," David continued, I secretly started recording our partner meetings 2 years ago when I noticed discrepancies. I was building a case to take to the authorities, but I was scared. Andrew had connections everywhere, but now that he's in custody, I want to provide everything I have. After David hung up, Jennifer pulled one last document from her envelope. There's something else about Dad's will. Our father had died 5 years ago, leaving what we thought was a modest inheritance split between Jennifer and me. But the paper she handed me showed something different. A trust account, in my name alone, established the year before he died. He knew about my gambling problem, even then, Jennifer said quietly. He loved me, but he didn't trust me with money, so he set this up for you with Mom as the trustee. It's worth about $2 million. I stared at the document. $2 million that my father had hidden away to protect it from both Jennifer's addiction and, unknowingly, my husband's greed. The account was at a small private bank in Baltimore, one Andrew wouldn't have known about without Jennifer's information. We need to go see Mom, Jennifer said. Today. She's been holding on to something for you, something she didn't even tell me about. She said she was waiting for the right time. An hour later, we were at my mother's room at the memory care facility. She was having one of her increasingly rare clear days, her eyes bright and focused as she held my hand. I knew who he was the first time I met him, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. The way he looked at our house, evaluating everything, like he was cataloging assets. The way he steered conversations toward money. Your father saw it too. She pulled a small key from her drawer. Safe deposit box, National Bank on Main Street. Your father put things in there the week before he died. Documents, evidence. Evidence of what, Mom? Andrew tried to forge your signature last year. Loan documents, property transfers. The bank manager was your dad's friend. He called me, sent me copies of everything. It's all in the box. I took the key, feeling its weight. My father had been protecting me even from the grave. My mother had been standing guard over that protection, despite her declining memory. There's more, Mom said, squeezing my hand. The SEC came yesterday. Not because of Andrew's arrest, but something bigger. They said his name came up in an investigation that's been running for 3 years. A ring of fund managers who have been systematically defrauding elderly clients in 5 states. The room suddenly felt airless. Andrew's abandonment in the rain wasn't just about control or cruelty. He knew the SEC was closing in. He wanted to leave me broken and compliant because he thought he could use me as a shield or a scapegoat when everything collapsed. He never expected you to fight back, my mother said, a small smile crossing her face. Men like him never do. They think kindness is weakness. They're always surprised when they find out the opposite is true. As we prepared to leave, my mother squeezed my hand one more time. Your father would be so proud of you. You are stronger than Andrew ever imagined. Driving away from downtown with Jennifer beside me and Marcus following in his truck, I thought about the layers of deceit Andrew had constructed. Every revelation peeled back another layer of his criminality. He wasn't just a bad husband or a corrupt manager. He was the center of a financial abuse ring that had destroyed dozens of lives. But he made one fatal mistake. He assumed the woman he left in the rain would stay there, broken and defeated. Instead, she became the storm that would wash away everything he'd built on the backs of others suffering. The National Bank on Main Street stood like a fortress of old money and even older secrets. Jennifer waited in the car while Marcus accompanied me inside, where the safe deposit box my mother had guarded waited in a climate-controlled vault. The bank manager, Mr. Paulson, remembered my father well and handled the key with the reverence of someone who understood he was part of something significant. Inside the box was a pile of documents that made my hands tremble. Forged loan applications with my signature, dated 6 months ago. Property transfer papers for my grandmother's lake house, which Andrew had apparently tried to sell without my knowledge. Account statements for accounts I'd never seen, opened in my name, but controlled by Andrew. My father had somehow obtained copies of everything, with sticky notes in his handwriting explaining what each document meant. One note stuck to a forged power of attorney document simply said, "He will try to take everything. Don't let him." Marcus photographed every single page while I sat in stunned silence. The magnitude of Andrew's betrayal kept expanding like ink in water. This wasn't just about our marriage or even the stolen millions. He'd been systematically working to erase my financial existence, to make me completely dependent on him. Or worse, to frame me for his crimes if necessary. 4 months later, I walked into the federal courthouse for the first day of Andrew's criminal trial. The media attention had only intensified since his arrest. News vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions that I didn't answer. I wore a charcoal gray suit that had never seen the inside of our shared closet, bought specifically for this moment, professional, dignified, expensive enough to show I wasn't broken. Andrew was sitting at the defendant's table in a suit that no longer fit. He had lost weight in federal custody, and his formerly perfect hair had grown out awkwardly. When our eyes met across the courtroom, I smiled, the same serene smile I'd given him over morning coffee when he lectured me about my spending. But now that smile carried the weight of everything I knew and everything he was about to lose. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Miguel Torres, laid out the case methodically. 12 counts of wire fraud, 2 of elder abuse, 1 of conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The evidence was overwhelming: manipulated ledgers, hidden accounts, forged documents, recorded conversations where Andrew explicitly discussed stealing from clients. For 11 days, witness after witness took the stand. Elderly clients described how Andrew had convinced them to sign documents they didn't understand. Former employees testified about orders to falsify records. The forensic accountant walked the jury through the maze of offshore accounts and shell companies Andrew had created. On day 12, the courtroom doors opened and Nadia Jones walked in. She no longer looked like the polished young woman who wore my grandmother's pearls. Her designer clothes had been replaced by a conservative dress, her elaborate hairstyle by a simple bun, and she carried herself with a humility I'd never seen before. She had been granted immunity in exchange for her testimony and was about to bury Andrew with it. "Ms. Jones," the prosecutor began, "how long were you romantically involved with the defendant?" 18 months, Nadia answered, her voice firm but low. "And during that time, did Mr. Carter ever discuss his business practices with you?" "Yes, frequently. He thought it was funny to explain how he was moving money without anyone noticing. He called it playing three-dimensional chess while everyone else was playing checkers." She produced recordings from her phone, conversations where Andrew bragged about targeting elderly clients, about hiding money from me, about his plans to disappear to Costa Rica once he'd amassed enough. In one recording, his voice, clear and damning, said, "Amanda is the perfect cover. Sweet, trusting. She doesn't ask questions. By the time she figures out what's going on, I'll be long gone, and she'll be left holding the bag." But Nadia's most devastating revelation came near the end of her testimony. 3 weeks before his arrest, Andrew told me he was planning on leaving me too. He had another woman in Costa Rica, someone he met online. He was just going to abandon me, just like he abandoned his wife. The expression on Andrew's face was worth every moment of pain he'd caused me. His jaw went slack. His lawyer whispered frantically in his ear, but the damage was done. His mistress had just revealed that he had been playing everyone, including her. The next day brought another surprise. A young man named Christopher Valdez took the stand, 22 years old, with the same sharp jaw and calculating eyes as Andrew. The prosecutor established his identity quickly: Andrew's son from a college relationship, whose existence Andrew had hidden for over 2 decades. "My mother has been receiving payments from Andrew Carter for 22 years, Christopher testified, $1,500 a month to keep silent about my existence. And you have records showing the money came from his client accounts?" I watched as Andrew slumped in his chair as Christopher continued. "He told my mother if she ever contacted his family or went public with this, he would destroy her reputation and make sure she never worked in finance again. She has that threat in writing." The prosecutor presented 22 years of bank records, showing regular payments from the same accounts Andrew had been pillaging. He'd been stealing from elderly clients not just for luxuries and escapes, but to hide evidence of his past. Andrew's defense attorney tried to object, arguing this was prejudicial and irrelevant to the financial crimes, but Judge Coleman dismissed it. It establishes a pattern of deception and financial malfeasance that spans the defendant's entire adult life. On the final day of testimony, Andrew made the disastrous decision to take the stand himself against his lawyer's visible protests. He got up and walked to the stand, still believing he could talk his way out of this. For 2 hours, he tried to weave a narrative where he was the victim. He claimed I knew about the affairs and approved. He insisted the elderly clients had authorized every transaction. He presented himself as a brilliant financial mind who had simply made a few accounting errors. Then the prosecutor began his cross-examination, and Andrew's composure broke like ice under pressure. When he was confronted with the recordings, he claimed they were out of context. When he was shown the forged documents, he suggested I might have created them. When he was presented with evidence of the money paid to Christopher's mother, he actually said, "That was a personal matter, unrelated to my business." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. As the jury foreman stood to read the verdict, I held Marcus's hand on one side and Rebecca's on the other. On charge 1, wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On charge 2, wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. By the time they got to charge 15, Andrew had his head in his hands, guilty on all charges. The man who left me 37 miles from home in the rain was about to learn what abandonment really felt like. 2 weeks later, we returned for the sentencing. Judge Coleman, the same one who'd presided over our emergency hearing months ago, looked at Andrew with evident disgust. "Mr. Carter, you preyed on the most vulnerable members of society. You betrayed the trust of clients, colleagues, and family. You have shown no remorse, accepted no responsibility, even when confronted with overwhelming evidence of your crimes. This court sentences you to 96 months in federal prison without possibility of early release." 8 years. Andrew would spend 8 years behind bars. As the marshals prepared to lead him away, he turned to me one last time. "This isn't over," he shouted. I stood and spoke clearly, knowing the courtroom microphones would pick up every word. "You're right. The civil lawsuits begin next month." The marshals led Andrew away in chains, and I walked out of the courthouse into a September afternoon that felt like the first day of spring. The civil lawsuits would begin next month, with 17 of Andrew's victims seeking restitution. But that was Rebecca's battlefield. I had something more important to build now. The whistleblower's reward arrived 6 weeks after Andrew's sentencing, $1.2 million for providing information that led to the recovery of stolen funds. Combined with the assets the court awarded me and the trust fund my father had protected, I suddenly had the resources to do something meaningful with the pain Andrew had caused. Marcus found the building first, a renovated brownstone in downtown Brooklyn that had once housed a law firm, 3 stories, 8 offices, a conference room big enough for group sessions, and most importantly, multiple exits, something women escaping dangerous situations would need. We signed the lease on a Thursday. By Monday, the Phoenix Foundation had a home. "We need proper security systems," Marcus said, walking the empty rooms with his tablet, taking notes. "Panic buttons in every office, secure entry, surveillance that actually protects people instead of monitoring them." Valentina arrived with boxes of filing systems and encryption software. "I've already had 3 forensic accountants offer to volunteer their services. Word is spreading in the financial community about what we're doing." Rebecca had taken a leave from her practice to help establish our legal aid program. "We have to be careful how we structure this," she said, spreading incorporation papers over the conference table. "We're going to be dealing with dangerous situations, angry husbands, potential legal retaliation. Everything has to be bulletproof." Within a month, we had our first client, Maria, a teacher whose husband had hidden her savings and threatened to report her to immigration if she tried to leave, even though she was a citizen. Valentina found the money. Rebecca filed the papers. Marcus arranged for safe transportation. I sat with Maria as she cried, remembering my own tears in that hotel room the night Andrew abandoned me. Jennifer came to the foundation on a rainy Tuesday, 3 months sober, and carrying a box of donuts as a peace offering. "I want to help," she said simply. "I know what it's like to be manipulated, to be so desperate you betray the people you love. Maybe I can help others see the signs before it's too late." She started as a volunteer, answering phones and filing documents, but Jennifer had a gift for talking to women who called in crisis. She understood desperation and shame in ways even trained counselors sometimes couldn't. In 6 months, she was leading our support groups, sharing her story of how Andrew exploited her addiction for information, helping others recognize when they were being used. My mother came to visit on one of her clear days, with Marcus driving her carefully through the city she had once known so well. She sat in my office looking at the framed photos on the walls, women who'd given permission to share their success stories, radiant faces in front of new apartments, at graduation ceremonies with children they'd managed to keep safe. "Your father would be so proud," she said, touching a photo of a woman who had escaped with 3 kids and was now in nursing school. "He always said the best revenge against cruelty was kindness to others." She pulled an envelope from her purse. "This came to the house. I thought you should see it." Inside was a newspaper clipping from the prison bulletin. Andrew had been elected treasurer of the Inmates Investment Club. Even behind bars, he was trying to maintain his image as a financial genius. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. The surprise volunteer came 7 months after the trial. Nadia Jones was at our reception desk. She no longer looked like the woman who wore my grandmother's pearls. She had cut her hair short, traded the designer clothes for simple slacks and a button-down shirt, and carried herself with a humility I had never seen before. "I've been in therapy," she said, sitting across from me in my office, working through how I got involved with someone like Andrew, why I ignored the red flags, why I participated in hurting you. "I know I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can keep other young women from making my mistakes." She started giving talks at universities, warning business students about older men in positions of power who promised career advancement in exchange for companionship. She was brutally honest about her own choices, taking responsibility while explaining the gradual manipulation that made those choices seem reasonable at the time. "He made me feel special," she told a group of grad students one night, "like I was smarter and more sophisticated than other women my age. By the time I realized I was just another pawn in his game, I was in too deep to see a way out." A year after Andrew's sentencing, a letter arrived at the foundation. His handwriting was still perfect, even on prison stationery. 4 pages of vitriol blaming me for his downfall, claiming I had orchestrated everything from the beginning, that I had trapped him. He listed every perceived grievance, every moment he now realized had been part of my plan. The last line read, "I hope you've learned your lesson." I had the letter professionally framed and hung it on the wall in my office, right next to my degrees and certifications. When clients asked about it, I told them the truth. Yes, I had learned my lesson. I learned that when someone shows you who they are through their cruelty, believe them. I learned that patience and planning could overcome years of abuse. And most importantly, I learned that the best response to someone who tries to break you is to become unbreakable, and then to use that strength to lift others up. 18 months after that night at the rest stop, I stood in my office looking at a wall covered in thank you cards. 87 women had found their way to safety through the Phoenix Foundation. Some only needed legal advice and financial analysis. Others required full-blown extraction plans, safe houses, and new identities. Each one arrived broken in some way, convinced they were trapped, that their situation was hopeless. Elena Rodriguez, the widow Andrew had defrauded, became our biggest donor. She recovered most of her money through the civil lawsuits and insisted on funding our emergency shelter program. "That man tried to convince me I was losing my mind," she said at our fundraising gala. "Amanda showed me that I was actually finding my strength." The rain was falling again outside, drumming against the windows of the brownstone that housed hope and second chances. I thought of that night 37 miles from home, standing in the downpour as Andrew drove away, confident he had broken me. He thought he was teaching me about power and control, about knowing my place. Instead, he taught me that cruelty creates its own destruction, that every action has a consequence, and that sometimes the person you abandon in the rain has already seen the storm coming and prepared accordingly. Through the Phoenix Foundation, his act of calculated cruelty became the catalyst for saving women he never believed deserved to be saved. The final lesson, the one Andrew never saw coming, wasn't about obedience, respect, or knowing one's place. It was about transformation. He tried to leave me powerless in a storm. I became the eye of the hurricane. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.